Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the LPC meeting number 6, which means we've had 5 meetings already regarding DRI projects. Tonight's goal, and we will hear more from everyone involved with the projects, is to prioritize the projects that have sort of made it through the first line of questioning, is the way I would put it. And I just would like to remind everybody that there are a number of projects. We should be hearing pros and cons and prioritization of each of them, and then think of them together, as I always like to talk about these projects and initiatives. Some very exciting initiatives I think folks are going to be hearing about tonight. We'll prioritize, and then at next week's meeting, we will have some sort of a list with some prioritization. Catherine will be taking over at this point and running the meeting for us.
All right, thank you so much, Mary Levin. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening for our second to last LPC meeting in the Downtown Revitalization Initiative process for the Village of Ossining. Let's get started. Christy, could you change the slide? Okay, so here's the agenda for tonight's meeting. We'll start with a discussion of conflicts of interest. Then we'll move quickly into the project evaluation process. We're going to share online feedback that we've received from over 150 community members on the different projects. We're going to share updates on the 15 projects because they've continued to be developed since we last met a month ago. And then we're going to look ahead to community meeting 3, which is taking place next week, where we'll be presenting the preliminary slate of projects for DRI funding. So yeah, we're really looking forward to having a robust discussion and really engaging all LPC members on today's call. Okay, there will be an opportunity for public comment at this evening's meeting. We expect to do that between 7:45 and 8 p.m. If you would like to ask a question or share a comment, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. You could press *9 if using a phone. If you raise your hand during the presentation and discussion, note that we'll see it, but we will not address it until the public comment session at the end. We've disabled the chat function to reduce distraction, and we wanted to remind folks that this meeting and all of the commentary and discussion is being recorded. Okay, so we've already heard a welcome from Mayor Levin. I think I'm going to turn it over to Susan from the Department of State for conflicts of interest.
Sure. Thanks, Catherine. So a reminder about the obligation to disclose and/or recuse. Each local planning committee member is reminded of their obligation to disclose potential conflicts of interest with respect to any of the projects that may be discussed today. If you have a potential conflict of interest regarding a project you believe will be discussed during the meeting, please disclose it now and recuse yourself from any discussion or vote about that project. For example, you may state that you or a family member have a financial interest in the project, or you are on the board of an organization proposing the project. Do any members need to make a disclosure?
I do.
Okay.
I just wanted to disclose that I've been approached by Bill Balter for potential work on murals and signage for his 30 Water Street property, which is not a DRI potential project, but it's close to the Sing Sing Kill project, which is. I just wanted to disclose that. I'm not in contract with him, just in conversation.
Thanks, Joyce. Anyone else need to make a disclosure? Okay. All right. Please inform the co-chairs and the entire group during the meeting if the need to disclose a conflict arises unexpectedly. And of course, please recuse yourself from discussion or voting on that. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Susan. All right, let's move ahead. Okay, so at every meeting, we share this chart that outlines the DRI planning process. It's a 6-month-long process, almost 7 if you include July. And we're nearing the end. We're in the home stretch. We are at the second to last local planning committee meeting. Next week on Tuesday evening, we will have the final community meeting where all members of the public are welcome to attend and offer feedback. And then a week following that, on Tuesday, June 21st, we'll have the concluding LPC meeting where you all will affirm that the preliminary list of projects is what you'd like to recommend for DRI funding. You'll see here that we've developed draft project profiles. So each of the 15 projects now has a more detailed project profile to accompany it. And we're beginning work on the strategic investment plan, which is our final deliverable. And that includes a summary of the process to date, as well as discussion of implementation going forward. Okay, so the meat of this meeting is discussing the project evaluation process. You may remember that following our last meeting in early May, you performed an initial assessment of each proposed DRI project using the DRI project evaluation criteria. Prior to today's meeting, we provided some draft project profiles, which provided more detailed information. And tonight, we're going to ask that this group, we hope by consensus, select a preliminary slate of projects to recommend for DRI funding. And as I mentioned before, these will be shared with the community next week. I think we're getting a little background. Erica, it's nice to see you. Would you mind muting?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it wasn't on mute.
That's okay, no problem. I just saw you light up green. Okay, so just to give you a preview of next week's community meeting before we dive into the projects, we want to let you know that attendees will be asked to select the projects that they think best meet the overall goals of the DRI program and the goals for downtown Ossining. So you all today will put together a list, and then we will be asking meeting attendees to select their top 5 projects by using tickets to pick their favorites, their top projects. And then for those who cannot attend the community meeting, an online form will be made available for a rather short window from Wednesday of next week through Sunday. And then we will compile all that community feedback and share it again at our next meeting. So we're still hoping to, get a little more feedback from the community through this process once you've selected this preliminary list. Okay, so Christy, I'm going to turn it over to you to share what we've learned from the community surveys that were available throughout the month of May.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure. I've been having some difficulties with my computer. Okay.
Yes.
So as Catherine mentioned, during the month of May, after community meeting 2, the members of the community, excuse me, were able to provide feedback on that preliminary list of projects, the 15 projects that we had in 2 different ways. And that was via the virtual meeting room as well as a Microsoft form. Respondents were asked the following questions. Does this project have the potential to be transformative or catalytic for downtown Ossining? What do you like about this project? And how could this project be improved? 2 projects had additional targeted questions, those being the public improvements as part of the mixed-use development at the Main Street lots and the streetscaping at Station Plaza project. So through the online feedback opportunities, they were promoted in several ways, including inclusion in the village's email blasts that went out weekly, posts to the village's social media accounts, targeted outreach to 25 stakeholder groups, which included emails and calls, and reminders to the LPC to share to your networks. We received in total 151 responses, of which 143 were submitted via the Microsoft form, and then 8 were submitted through the virtual meeting room. I do want to note that through the Microsoft form, some respondents responded to every single project, whereas other respondents chose to respond to only a few projects, depending on what they were interested in at the time. So just something to keep in mind. And again, 151 responses, which is a great response rate. So with that in mind, we now would like to move on to going through the list of projects that we have and sharing some of the representative comments that we've received, as well as project updates. The VHB team, as well as our consultants and the state, have been working closely with the project sponsors to draft those profiles that have been sent over to you. And in doing so, there's been some updates to the projects that we'd like to share. We ideally would like to go through all the projects first, and then we'll open the floor to discussion for the LPC to discuss those projects, the updates, and any of the comments that we received as well. So the first project that we'd like to talk about is the transform the Joseph G. Caputo Community Center. The sponsor is the Village of Ossining. The total project cost is $6.1 million, and the DRI funding request is $2.5 million. As you could see here in these call outs, these are some of the representative comments that we received from the public. I'll read one. It says, this project seems like it would be a benefit all of Ossining and could be transformative to the whole community. And as you could see, I'm not going to read all the comments, but just so everyone sees here, some representative comments from the community. Project updates. The total project cost is being updated to include pool upgrades, and the project will need to meet the New York State Stretch Energy Code, and we are evaluating the different project components to determine the required energy efficiency measures. Once incorporated, the total project cost and DRI funding request may increase. And we're currently working with NYSERDA and their consultants to have those discussions with the team. Okay, we'll go to the next. So the next project is to preserve and adaptively, reuse historic bank building at 200 Main Street. The sponsor is the Village of Ossining. The project cost is roughly $1.56 million, and the DRI request is the same. And as you can see here, the comments, I love the thought of saving a landmark building. And unless parking is creative, it's going to be a net negative. So interesting feedback that we received on this project. Some project updates. The village has issued an RFP to identify a development partner, and the total cost has been updated. It includes shell and core improvements, including replacing the roof and windows, facade repairs, an elevator, and an HVAC system. Fit out for future building occupant use is excluded. Okay, I'll go to the next, and Catherine.
All right, Kristen and I are going to trade off here.
We're saving all the questions and comments to the end, right?
That would be great. Yes.
Great, okay.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so this project, Enhance and Expand the Market Square Public Plaza, is new in a way. You may remember that as part of the presentation that the Village of Ossining made in early May, there was a project for public improvements as part of a mixed-use redevelopment at Market Square. That project has been split into two. So the first is enhancing and expanding the Market Square Public Plaza. So this project is focused on the open space component. You can see that the total project cost, which is based on a conceptual design, is $3.49 million. We expect to work together with the designers on our team and the cost estimators to rescope the project and decrease that total project cost. The DRI funding request from the Village of Ossining is $2 million. And it's important to note that the village has issued an RFQ to identify a development partner for the Main Street lots, which are adjacent to Market Square, and they would be an important project partner. The village would collaborate with them while building out this space. We took a look at the comments that we received for this project, and there are people who really care about the way the public space is designed, right? So on the left, you can see a lot of ideas about how the plaza could be designed, including a tent structure, trucks being able to drive on and off the plaza, and other spaces for people to stroll through and sit and have lunch. You can see that on the right, folks said, love the plaza public gathering park idea, do not like the parking structure. There seems to be enough parking already. So some folks combined their responses. Go to the next. Okay, so the next project is to build a multimodal transportation center to facilitate downtown development. So as I mentioned earlier, in early May, when the Village of Ossining presented their projects, I'm sorry, yeah, thank you. Someone just knocked on my office door. When the Village of Ossining presented their projects, we had, as part of the public improvements at Market Square, a parking garage proposed. So we've separated that out, and we've changed the project such that it would include parking for personal vehicles, as well as EV charging stations and bicycle infrastructure. There are a number of different ways that we could approach the bicycle infrastructure improvements. For example, the village is pursuing grant funding for an e-bike program, and this could be an important location through that program. You can see the comments. We received a lot of comments on this project in particular. Folks have said, not sure. I keep hoping we'll transition to more public transit use and then require fewer parking structures. Others say, like, yes, this is transformative because additional parking will be useful and encourage more tourism, enabling restaurants and other attractions to thrive. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Christy.
So the next project is to preserve and revitalize the historic Olive Opera House building. The sponsor, that is actually an error on the slide, I apologize, is Twinsy and Madeline Fan. The total project cost is $3.1 million, and the DRI funding request is $1.5 million. Since our last time meeting, they have since provided a letter of support in connection to the Sing Sing Prison Museum, which is considering a 5-year lease for its preview center. The project will also be required to meet the New York State Stretch Energy Code, and the required energy efficiency measures are included in the total project cost. And as you could see here, a lot of positive comments came in for this project. Many people did believe that this project is transformative and that maybe the project should include an eatery or some other use to draw to the Olive Opera House to make it multi-use. And following this project is launching the Sing Sing Prison Museum Preview Center in downtown Ossining. So as we last heard from Brent, now at LPC meeting 4, I believe it was, the proposed project is the preview center. So as you could see here, the total project cost is $697,000, and the DRI request is $600,000. The DRI request was reduced, and this includes the exhibition production and design. And we received a letter of support, as I mentioned, from the Olive Opera House for the Sing Sing Prison Museum. And from the community, we received a mix of comments. As you could see, there's a potential for a huge regional draw for Ossining if coupled maybe with some other DRI proposed projects. And that this is a type of anchor attraction that has the possibility of increasing the visibility and draw to the village.
Okay.
Back to Catherine.
Thank you. All right, the next project is establishing a grant program for commercial building facade improvements. This project has not changed substantially since our last meeting. The sponsor is the Village of Ossining. The total project cost is $660,000. The DRI funding request is $600,000. Since the last meeting, the Village of Ossining has been exploring a potential partnership with a community lending agency to manage the financial aspects of the program. And you can see that we've received positive comments about making buildings look cleaner, fresher. We've also received comments suggesting that we get commitments from the businesses to offset the cost of the facade improvements. I can move to the next. Okay. Relatedly, there is a project to enhance streetscaping in the Station Plaza neighborhood with the goal of improving connectivity. Since our last meeting, the total project cost has been updated. It increased to $857,000. This includes street repaving, sidewalk widening, decorative fencing, as well as some median landscaping and new trees. We received a mix of comments about this project. Some folks said, I think this is a good idea. It could help draw people to the area. Other folks expressed concerns about gentrification, placemaking, and some folks say that you can see this area from the train. So if it looks inviting, folks may be more inclined to walk up the hill to Main Street and better connect the two parts of downtown Ossining. All right, I'll turn it back to you, Christy.
So this project is enhancing the Sing Sing Hill Greenway as a community and environmental asset. The total project cost is $400,000 and the DRI funding request is $375,000. The consultant team is preparing a conceptual design for interpretive signage to be installed along the Greenway. As you can see here, a mix of comments. Some people think that it's a great idea, but not sure if it's transformational enough. Others say that it's a recreational and educational, as well as an environmentally proactive project. And others are saying that it's a great asset for the downtown to extend the Greenway itself and to provide another activity for people without having to use a car in the village. So this project is to create permanent public art installations along the waterfront. The total project cost and the DRI funding request is $125,000. The village would partner with a community arts organization to administer a local selection process for new sculpture installations. And as you can see here, again, a mix of comments received from the public. Some of the members of the public saying that art equals commerce, or that let's not make displays permanent. Or maybe that this project isn't too transformational, but having some art sculptures is culturally enriching. And the DRI funding request, something to note, will only fund permanent art installations, not temporary exhibitions. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, I'll turn it back to Catherine.
Okay, so the next project is to upgrade the Lewis Angle Waterfront Park performance space. Since we've last met, the total project cost and DRI funding request have been increased to account for the increased cost of construction, as well as exploring a new bathroom near the performance space. We recently received some new drawings from the town of Ossining, who has proposed this project, which we can share with you. The DRI funding request is $600,000. You can, yeah, thanks, Chris. You can keep going. And it would remain $600,000 in any event, whether option 1 or option 2 were to move forward. In this case, option 1, you see the stage is repositioned such that when folks are watching a performance at sunset, the sun will not be in their eyes. It's a rather simple structure with a roof, but not enclosed at the sides. The second option reorients the stage more similarly located to where it is today. It's a larger stage structure and more covered. In this case, the town is still seeking $600,000, but the total project cost would increase, and the DRI funding would cover phase one only, which is the front part of the stage, not the portion that goes over the pathway and nears the waterfront. Okay. We're nearing the end here. We have a project to expand Haverstraw Ossining ferry service to the weekends. This project has not changed dramatically since we last met. The villages of Ossining and Haverstraw would jointly manage the pilot program pursuant to an MOU that covers marketing, operations, and ongoing evaluation of the success of the pilot program. So there are conversations about what that would look like. The total project cost is $255,000, and the DRI funding request is $100,000.
The next project is to extend the village pier to enhance Hudson River access. The project cost and the DRI funding request are both $1.5 million. The total project cost is being updated to account for the increased cost of construction, so that number may change. And as you could see here through the comments received by the public, we received a mix of comments. Some people are concerned about safety issues for kayakers or other boaters along the pier and in that area, whereas others think that this could enable attractions that will draw people to Ossining from across Westchester and beyond. Following, we have launch a free public Wi-Fi network in downtown Ossining. The total project cost is $150,000, and the DRI funding request is $120,000. The total project cost has been reduced since the last time we talked, based on conversations with Nurture, who will be providing the Wi-Fi for this project. And similarly to the last project, we received a mix of comments from the public. Some people said that they like that people will be able to work from downtown through this project, something that it is transformational, whereas others are concerned that doesn't everyone already have unlimited Wi-Fi on their phone? So we received a mix of comments for this project.
Okay, and our final project is to create a marketing and branding strategy with Wayfinding signage. You may remember that these were originally two separate projects. After speaking with the project sponsor, the Village of Ossining, and one of our sub-consultants who specializes in economic development, we thought that it would make sense to combine these two projects, so that as you're developing a branding strategy, a marketing strategy and branding, that could be reflected in the wayfinding signage. That said, it may also be possible to have a wayfinding project that doesn't reflect the branding. You can see that we received a mix of comments here as well. A big need for this because the waterfront and downtown sometimes feel disconnected, and this would help people navigate the space. Some folks who say, in the era of cell phones, maybe you don't need signage. The consultant team looking ahead is preparing a conceptual design to look at where signage could be installed throughout downtown in order to most effectively speak to connectivity and important assets. Okay, so that was all 15 proposed DRI projects. We're happy to go back as needed during discussion. But let's move ahead and talk about how we would select the preliminary slate.
Can I butt in and say that Melita needs to be brought over? She's in the attendance, Melita Silva.
Thank you for that, Trustee White. Jamie, is that something you could do? Okay, we'll message
I
Jamie
haven't
to make
seen
sure that she brings Melita over. I also see that Marcia's joined us. Hi, Marcia.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Okay, so thinking about the preliminary slate of projects, we first wanted to revisit the goals that had been established earlier this year about downtown Austining and the impact that the DRI funding could have. The first goal pertains to transportation and mobility. With that goal, we would like to improve walkability and connectivity within downtown Austining, which has a steep hill, as we know, by implementing improvements that enhance safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, promotes transit ridership, and addresses concerns about parking availability. The second goal is around economic development and strengthening the local economy by leveraging downtown Austining's existing assets to attract visitors and foster economic development that's inclusive, sustainable, and resilient, so the area continues to reflect the village's cultural and socioeconomic diversity. We have a goal around housing, encouraging the creation of mixed income housing in downtown Austining through public-private partnerships that result in the rehabilitation of existing buildings and the construction of new mixed-use, transit-oriented buildings on certain strategic sites. Lastly, we have a goal around open space, recreation, arts, and culture, through which we would want to enhance the abundant public amenities within downtown Austining, including the waterfront, green spaces, and the community center, to encourage a vibrant sense of place through outdoor dining, public art, and ongoing cultural programming. So we have 4 goals that we set out at the beginning of the process. On the next slide, you'll see that we have listed all of the projects and took a stab at which goals they help support. You'll see that many of the goals support local economic development, as well as open space, recreation, arts, and culture. Transportation and mobility is a bit more mixed. And we do not have any projects that touch on housing. So we thought that this was sort of helpful framing for folks as we think about refining the project list. Okay. Then if we move ahead to think about the project criteria, I think, Christy, you were going to quickly touch on these different categories, which folks reviewed while assessing the projects online.
Exactly. So you may remember the project evaluation criteria that we discussed previously and you reviewed, as Catherine mentioned. And I'll just quickly go through the 6 main categories: transformative and catalytic potential, project readiness and feasibility, sponsor capacity, public support, and then economic benefit and community benefit. So it's good to keep these in mind as we now talk through the project list. As Catherine mentioned, the next slide is going to provide a list of all of the projects, as well as their total costs, the DRI funding, and also their leveraged funds. So again, keep those questions in the back of your mind as we're starting now to dive into the preliminary list of projects.
My mistake, I was on mute. Okay, so this is the big slide, right, where we have listed all of the projects, their total cost, the DRI funding request, any leveraged funds that would be contributed from other sources, and then we've totaled it. And so, as you've seen, we have many excellent projects, but the DRI funding is limited to $9.7 million. Per the DOS guidance, we should aim to have between $12 and $15 million in projects to share in the strategic investment plan. So now we are at 15,712,000. So we're just over the amount that the Department of State has requested in the strategic investment plan. If you all decide to remove a project from the list, you can elect to include it in a list of complementary projects in the DRI plan. Those projects won't receive DRI funding, but their inclusion in a state-sponsored plan highlights the project for other sources of state funding, many of which can be found in the consolidated funding application that was sent last week to the LPC, as well as the project sponsors. So you as LPC members have the option to remove a project from DRI consideration or reduce the amounts for the projects. And again, we're at 15.7 million, and we're aiming to have between 12 and 15 to submit to the state. And so I think at this point I will pause and we can open the floor for folks to ask questions that they may have, and also express any feelings about the top projects that you would like to see funded. Okay, I already see some hands.
Yeah.
I think Kim, yours was the first to go up, followed by Jeff. So Kim, I'll give you the floor.
Catherine, I ended up a little bit confused, I guess, about the Market Square proposal. As I understood it previously, there were going to be buildings along Main Street with the square behind it. Now I'm uncertain whether there are buildings on that proposal at all or not. I don't know what we're actually voting on or considering.
Okay, I can help clarify. Thank you. So the village has issued an RFQ for redevelopment of the Market Square and Main Street lots. That RFQ is currently open, and they're hoping to identify a development partner who would construct buildings on some of that site. Right now, the conceptual design for the public plaza locates the new public plaza on Market Square, like where it is today, and expands it. So the public plaza would be enhancing and expanding the existing Market Square, and the redevelopment, from what I understand, would then be on the parking lots nearer to the post office. Is that helpful?
Catherine, I think it would be helpful. To just clarify the fact that we're doing, in the absence of us to move ahead with elements of a total project.
Yes. I think what I heard you say is that in the
So
absence.
that was the impedance for changing that. So Kim, this allows, and everybody else, this allows us, this intent is still to do the redevelopment, more parking, but this allows us to move a bit forward in the event that it takes us longer to identify a developer. Most likely, though, it's all going to happen in concert with so there could be some modifications to the ultimate design of Market Square and the situation of the buildings. But a lot of the feedback we got from developers was that the post office lot was the more desirable site for mixed use.
I'm sorry, Karen, you were breaking up a bit. So what I think I'm hearing you say is that there will probably not be any buildings on the east side there. On the current Market Square site, the buildings would happen across the street on the post office side of the parcels?
That seems to be the direction. It is subject to maybe some modifications, but that seems to be what we're hearing would be more desirable, given the mandate for a public square incorporated in the development.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Karen. I see that our two co-chairs have their hands raised. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll acknowledge Mayor Levin, and then Marcia, and then Jeff. Sorry about that.
Hi, thank you. So I have 2-3 questions. One's a point of clarification so everybody understands. So the Olive Opera House came to us, really it's a private entity because that's part of the DRI process, which is great. And they're the sponsors. And I know that's just a typo and you'll fix it. But the Sing Sing one, the sponsor is the village. Why wouldn't it be Sing Sing Museum is the sponsor as a nonprofit rather than the village? And I probably should have asked this weeks ago and months ago, but I'm just curious as I want to understand the delineation. And also similarly, why is the village a sponsor of the performing stage rather than the town as a sponsor?
Yeah, I'm sorry about the confusion. For the Olive Opera House, they are a private sponsor. For the Sing Sing Prison Museum, it is sponsored by the museum, the nonprofit. They are contemplating locating within the Olive Opera House.
No, understood, but in that header on that project, this is all being recorded. Are you changing, are they the sponsor or is the village the sponsor?
The museum is the sponsor.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's.
there was an error, we'll change that. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
about
that's
that.
fine. That's cool. And similarly, I just want to get like sort of the delineation. So it's like a multi-layered environment. I want everybody to be on the same page and make sure that I actually understand what's going on. So you'll correct that. And is that also the same for the town is actually the sponsor for the performing space?
That's correct.
Okay, not the village. All right, so that was like one of my questions, just for a point of clarification. The second thing, I just want to know where the goalposts are here. If we're at 15.7 and the goal is 12 to 15, is the role for us right now to say, how do you bring it down by 3 million? Or how do you bring it down by 712,000? Like, I just want to, because it changes. I mean, I'm looking at these and I'd like to sort of state what I think in a priority format and why I think I'd like to bring it to the forefront. One project may be more important to me than another, but it makes a difference whether I'm looking for 3 million or 3.7 or 700,000 when I say that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And really it is up to the LPC. You know, I don't mean to pass the buck, so to speak, but you know, if the LPC were to feel strongly about projects that total $15 million, all of those could be included in the strategic investment plan that goes to the state. That said, ultimately, $9.7 million will be allocated, right? And so if $15 million of projects are sent, fewer would ultimately be funded than if it was a lower dollar amount. If you had sent, you know, maybe 13 or $14 million worth of projects.
Okay.
And Catherine, I can just add, you know, I think from the state perspective, you know, a $13 to $14 million range is a really good place to be because unforeseen events happen. Some projects don't necessarily happen that are maybe chosen for that, you know, initial 9.7. And so we do want to have, you know, projects that have been evaluated and gone through the state process as potentially other ones that we know that the LPC is also in favor of. So like the whole point of that 12 to 15 is to build in that cushion and the unforeseen event that a project can't go forward.
Okay. All good. So those were, I would like to state the things that I think are a priority. I'm not sure this is the moment in time, and I don't want to hog the microphone. So should I be doing it now, or should we have more questions and then come back and I can raise my hand again? What is the process here?
Yeah, I think that if you would like to share your priorities now, that would make sense.
Okay.
And then we can, you know, make sure that other folks have the ability to chime in as well.
Well, then I'll try to keep it really short. So I don't want to discuss why I don't think something's a high priority, because I think all of these are. I don't think they would have made it to this list, and I want to be very clear about that. There were lots of other projects. These made it to the list because they're all high priority. So this is like not quite choosing between your 4 children. Who do you like most? it's more about deciding, do you want to have 4 children? So to me, the number one, if we do nothing else, is the community center. I've made it clear all along. I look at the XY axis, what reaches the most people. I actually would add a check mark next to mobility, by the way. The fact is that that community center is the middle of our community. Not all community centers are located that way. You know, there was even DRI projects in other communities where they have to move community centers around. Ours is there, and it allows people to walk. That is a big deal. And it allows you to go Sing Sing, you know, for the walking to the rest of the community. So I think that should have a check mark next to it when I looked at that form. So I think community center reaches the most people of all ages, of all incomes, inside of Austining and outside of Austining, and represents our community. So for me, if we did nothing else, that would be the one where the money goes. The historic bank building, I just think after 5 decades in the sort of the entrance of our community, I think it's important to focus. And I think there are a lot of people, including the chamber, that have always been involved in that. The market square is long overdue. The historian, every historian has talked about that. I don't want to be redundant and repeat. The downtown, to build the modal transportation scares me. You know, that's like a big project. So it scares me. Like, where's that going to go? Is it going to be 11 million? Is it going to be 20 million? Is it going to be 8 million? I have no idea. I do know this. If we don't do this during this DRI, this village, given its income, given its folks, given its budgets and all the other projects, will never get to this if we don't use this DRI moment to do something big like this, something new, big, and important for all the reasons that have been stated. So that to me is why it becomes a priority project. The Olive Opera House caught me totally from left field in this process. So thank you to the DRI. I would have never known about all the opportunities there. I think I sort of fell in love with it. I don't even have a good reason why it's a high priority, except I just think it's going to be available from an economic development point of view. The fact that Sing Sing Museum wants to be in there is already a tenant, and there's a tenant there already. Actually, the location, everything makes it so viable to me and so reachable that it's great that we have this sort of private to women who want to make it happen with government. I think that's a very big deal. I've always been a supporter of Sing Sing Museum. I think the opportunity to combine that works. I'm going to skip the facade because I think we can get money elsewhere for that. The streetscaping, I think people misunderstand what streetscaping is. And I don't want to take this time having the microphone and explaining, but I do think that area of our community needs a facelift. I think streetscaping is an engineering kind of very unfriendly term and makes people not really react. I think maybe we need a little bit more understanding about what that is. And I'm just looking at the rest. I think the public art installation could be a complementary program. I wouldn't put that. The performance space is a town. I mean, what the heck? Why not? It's going to bring so many, it already brings so many people with the improvement. It makes the people that live here, especially people, I've said this before, when you have 48% of people living in apartments, condos, etc., having green space by a waterfront, everything we can do to improve that is only an upside. So that, I'm sorry, that's a performance space. The ferry service, I think will do what I just said. It also gives mobility and regionalizes this program. It's not a lot of money. It will be in conjunction with, half of it will be paid by Haverstraw. So we should leverage that opportunity. The Wi-Fi, I think, will probably be able to get somewhere else as a complementary service. Marketing and branding and the wayfinding. It's another one of those projects that we can probably get money somewhere else. I hope I didn't say it all so fast, but I thought this was actually the purpose of the meeting today. So I just wanted to, I'm hoping, Catherine, that somebody took notes as I was going through this and
I did.
gave it the numbers of 1 through 15 or so. And I think if I did my math right, I did bring it down to about 13 million when I took my notes, but I did the notes on the back of an envelope. So literally, so, I may have done the math wrong, but that's sort of like my 3.5 cents worth. And I hope I didn't take too much time.
Thank you, Mayor Levin. I appreciate it. I want to give Dr. Gordon the opportunity to speak and say hello. And then I know that Jeff and Marlene have raised hands, as well as Erica and Kim.
Okay, so I'm going to say hello while I'm getting gas. I'm going to tell this gentleman, please fill me with regular, please. Thank you. So one, I want to say that I thought coming in at the first pass at 15.7 million was pretty good. I mean, in my estimation, I think that, you know, I've seen it come in as higher than that. So I think we should feel like we're in the range. And, you know, one technique to use might be to just say, and we do this sometimes at the REDC, what if we cut off, you know, 10% from each, you know, and so that's one way to look at it, but I don't necessarily think that's the most strategic way to look at things. So the one thing that I was thinking of is what is the ongoing carrying cost? Yeah, let me put this in a different way. Do any of these projects have other ancillary costs that should be considered for the village once the DRI is on? So let's say the multimodal transportation center, just a bit, you know, do one, or the pier, for example. So once these things are done, what is it going to take to make, you know, sustainability? It doesn't only mean green, it means can it be sustained? And what is the cost afterwards that we should be considering will be a cost to the village if these are approved? Do you know what I'm saying? Is that an appropriate question?
Yeah.
That's an excellent question.
Yes, I'm
Who said that?
seeing
Who said
Kim
that?
nodding her head and Erica saying that it's a good question. Yes, I mean, I
Okay.
think we under the project evaluation criteria have a question about, you know, the ability to operate and maintain the project over time. And so I think you've hit on, you know, two of the larger infrastructure projects that the village is sponsoring, the multimodal transportation center, as well as the pier extension, which could have maintenance and operations costs associated with them. We have not estimated those costs. The cost estimating that we've done is in connection to the capital improvements. But I think that's, you know, an important consideration to bear in mind.
So is that part of the process of your evaluation? Will you be able to give us, or to give the village, not some kind of estimate that, hey, you know, if you do, I'm picking on the pier, for example, that you have to budget, I have no idea. So if you have to budget $500,000 a year to maintain this pier, and what that would mean for taxpayers in the village. I'm just throwing that out as an example.
Yeah. I think we could speak with the village about that, and I think we could, you know, we could look at the list as a whole and say, you know, for example, you know, for a number of projects where we're leveraging additional funds, that's seen as a benefit from the state's perspective, right?
Right.
But from the village's perspective, those are also additional taxpayer dollars that are being put toward
Right.
projects.
And
So those are things I know the village has considered when they put together this list.
Okay, and I'll just say this one last thing and then I'll give up the floor here. There might even be projects here that can be revenue enhancement. For example, I know at community centers, there are some programs that there's a charge for. And so there might be revenue coming in on those. So I'm just throwing all those out as something that we should think about strategically, because, you know, we're sitting here today and leaving a legacy to the future of benefits, but potentially costs as well.
Great.
But
Thank you.
I think we're in good shape. I'm encouraged.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. Okay, Jeff, I'll cede the floor.
I've forgotten my questions now. So maybe Catherine would be helpful, certainly for me and maybe for others, to remind us what happens next. Like how does this? So this is going to go to the state, and the state's ultimately going to make the selection. A higher number gives them, I guess, more leeway to decide, you know, what gets funded, what doesn't. Maybe you can just remind us what that process is.
Yep, that's correct. So, so this month, at the end of the month, the this body, the LPC, will vote, we hope by consensus, on the list of projects that would be included in the strategic investment plan, which the consultant team will finalize next month in July. And then the Department of State will review it in August and make the final funding decisions. So these projects are a recommendation. And then the state will ultimately select the projects totaling 9.7 million that will move forward.
And Catherine, I'll just say the Department of State, as well as ESD and Homes and Community Renewal, are also evaluation partners for all of these projects.
That's right. I'm sorry. It is a multi-agency state team, and we should recognize that for sure.
So is it safe to assume then the closer we get to 9.7 million, the closer what we select will get funded? Or could the state then say, you know, they actually like something that we didn't choose that was on the list? How does that, could that
Yeah,
happen?
I mean, my sense is that the state would only be considering the projects that are on the list.
Okay.
And yes, I think the closer that you get to 12 million, the more likely the projects are to move forward. That said, you know, echoing what Susan had noted earlier, the state program likes to see between maybe 13 and 14 million as a sweet spot, because there may be some projects that fall out for unforeseen reasons.
Okay, got it. Just two more quick questions. And I think Karen already answered my one. If we're splitting out the development sites, the Market Square, the post office sites from the Market Square site, if a developer decides that they want to include or move the square into their development, you know, maintaining the size and increasing the size, hopefully, they can do that, right? This doesn't preclude them from doing that.
That's right. It's a conceptual design. Yep. So it's still at a fairly high level. And my understanding is that the program is flexible.
And you know, I think one of the potential benefits there is, and I know something we mentioned before, is that the developer could potentially help cover some of the maintenance costs. So to the question that was just raised, you know, it could be a public-private partnership, you know, so we don't necessarily have to think, you know, see the village paying for all the maintenance of the square, potentially, depending on what that agreement is. And then just the last question for the wayfinding, the number seems so low that I'm just sort of questioning, what's the scope? Are we going to get like one sign out of it? Are we like, what does that actually pay for? Because now that we've combined it with marketing, it seems quite low.
Yeah, we've been taking a look at precedent projects. And so this is comparable in scale to, for example, the branding, marketing, and wayfinding project in the Peekskill DRI plan. But we're continuing to refine it and work with our urban design consultant to put together a conceptual plan that could give a better sense of the number of signs and their location. But for a sense of scale, it's comparable with the Peekskill DRI plan.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Marlene, I think you're up next.
I just had one quick question and one, I guess, just to I guess help my head wrap my head around this a little bit more. When we're looking at the numbers, and I guess from the village side, if we're looking at the village projects, are they able to leverage more funds? And do we find that out now? So that if we had to decrease some of those costs for the DRI funding, was that even possible on the village side or for some of the other projects? And to also look at if we eliminated projects, you again said that there were some projects that could go off and be, you know, put back into the big bucket of projects and hopefully get funding from somewhere else. You know, are there parameters around those projects that we need to know about that we can say, okay, it doesn't fit us right now, but if they went back in the big bucket, they could probably hit, you know, downtown development funds or something else?
Yeah, good, great questions. To answer your second question first, and I may ask Susan to chime in too, but my sense is because all of these projects are eligible for DRI funds, they would likely be eligible for other state funding sources. So my sense is that, one project may not be necessarily better situated than another for other state funding sources. They all sort of meet the minimum eligibility requirements for the DRI program. And then to your first question about the leverage, it is within your power as LPC members to go back to a project sponsor and say, we would want to reduce the DRI funding request. Could the project still move forward? So that's something that we could do. I will say with the village, the funding, the leverage is taxpayer dollars, right? So we want to bear that in mind as well, to Marcia's point earlier. Does that help answer your questions, Marlene? Okay.
Well, again, and if I could, I just really want to make clear that I'm not opposed to spending dollars as long as there's a benefit, benefit back, so sometimes we need to do something because, something else needs to get done. So there might not be immediate revenue, but the long-term strategic scope is there. But I just think it's something, to cost benefits should be considered. And ongoing costs for the village should be considered.
Yeah.
Can I just ask another question? And I know this may be for Karen or Rika. The village pool, has that been completely paid for? Is that done? Are we done with that? So if that is actually off the taxpayer rolls, that would also help sway my thinking.
I can say that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Karen, did you want to answer that?
The pool, right now, we are actually, we have a grant from Sandy. Are you talking about the bond?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about the bond.
I have to check with Dale, but basically I talked to her, we have internal discussions about the cost of these projects and what we would have to say match if we got funded a certain amount for them. We're in good shape because I think we have most of our bond debt coming off within the next 2 years. So we're in pretty good shape. Exactly where the pool bond is, I'm not 100% sure. We will be putting more money into renovations there. So, but with another grant that complements this one. But we have taken that into consideration so that our debt service doesn't go through the roof.
That was why I asked the first question, because if the debt service is already going down, if we at least keep it stable, we're okay.
Yeah, and that looks like the situation we've been in, and some of these are necessary that we sort of had on our capital plan. It may have taken us longer to get there. Some of them possibly couldn't happen, but will catalyze other things if we have this funding. So, but we have done a lot of that internal discussion and work to make sure we're not getting a lot of money that we wouldn't be able to support. So that's very important internal conversation.
Okay. I see hands from Erica, Lindsay, Peter, and Kim. Kim, I think I'll recognize the folks who haven't yet spoken, and then I'll come back. All right, Erica, if you'd like to take the floor.
I really like Marcia's point about, trying to figure out which, money isn't obviously the only driver behind what our selections are, but I would be interested in knowing which of these projects will be self-sustaining, which of them will actually be generating income for the town. We know, for example, getting 200 Main Street back on the tax rolls is really important for a lot of people in the village. I'd be interested to know a little bit more about the ferry. Will there be a fee for folks to take the ferry? Will it be entirely free? Will the pier generate income for slips? Will the parking lot, I'm assuming that the parking lot is going to be paid for, so folks will have to pay to park there. So that will probably be, self-sustaining. But I think for me, it's important to know that there's some follow-up there and that it won't be a taxpayer burden moving down the road. And if we could have a little bit more information about some of those projects in the next session, that would be helpful.
Along with that, I'm not chiming in, I'm just clarifying. Catherine, it might be helpful to also name the launch the service, the ferry service to say pilot, because that also speaks to Erica's point. It's actually a pilot to see how it works, what might it bring in, how, you know, the reaction is, can we charge for it after the pilot is over, etc. I think that might also change the way someone looks at a pilot versus a permanent initiative.
Yeah, that's right. So for the weekend ferry service, it would be a pilot program. The funding would cover one season or one ferry service within 1 year, from the spring to the fall. Erica, to answer your question, the way it's structured is that there would still be a fee to ride the ferry, but it would be subsidized by both villages. And I think we've done some initial modeling of what that would look like. And I think the sort of question is, how many days of ferry service would we want to offer? And then you can look at, you know, how deep the subsidy is. But I think right now we're looking at subsidizing the cost. So 50% comes from the DRI funding and 50% comes from the writers.
And this has all been cleared up with the MTA, correct? Because they're historically difficult to deal with.
Yes, we've reached out to New York Waterways, which manages the service, and they've provided the cost estimate and are on board.
We also did that through MTA, so they are not as directly involved, but we have talked to the entities that would need to be involved to make this happen.
Okay, I think Lindsay had a hand raised.
Hi, yes. How much
Yes, okay.
confidence?
Okay.
Hi, how much confidence do you have in the leverage funds number, specifically in the multimodal transportation hub, because it's such a big number?
Yes, it is, and it's I think it's something that we've discussed with the village, and to Karen's earlier comments, they've also discussed internally with regards to, you know, how much debt service they could carry. Our expectation is that the multimodal transportation center would be revenue generating as well. Folks would be paying to park, and if there was an instance where developers arranged for offsite parking, they would pay a fee for that privilege.
But I guess, so is the confidence level that that 8 million, the 8.7 million is your confidence level 100% that it's a very realistic number?
Yes, our confidence level is high.
At 100%? Okay.
Okay, Peter, I think you had a hand raised as well.
Yeah, I mean, along the lines of some of the other comments about sustainability, I don't quite understand how the taxes for the Olive Opera House will work when that project is completed, if it is completed. They're not intending to operate it as a 501c3. So we're looking at a $3.1 million commercial building in downtown Austin. I know what my tax bill would be on a $3.1 million commercial building in downtown Austin. So what is our intention? Because nothing that they've proposed can possibly pay that tax bill. Is there a framework whereby we're going to reduce that because we're not going to really call it a commercial building, or how will that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's one where we are in some ways relying on the project sponsor to determine the financial feasibility. We know that for the Olive Opera House project, they have been in conversation with the Sing Sing Prison Museum about leasing space. Otherwise, they do not have tenants secured, right? So I think you're raising an important point
But
about
even if they did, there's not a tenant that they would secure in the sphere that they're envisioning their space operating, where it's going to pay that number. So, and I'm not saying that that's, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I think then we have to be clear when we're talking about what other things cost, that I don't see that project can really go on the tax rolls as envisioned as a commercial building. It's got to be something else. Does that exist?
Yeah, I think that's something we would need to discuss with the project sponsor. Yeah. All right, Kim, would you like to chime in?
Thanks, and sorry to come back for a second. So I wasn't quite sure what the format of this portion of the meeting was going to be. Can you just, I guess I was surprised when the presentation was made. We keep calling the museum a preview center, but I walked away from the previous presentations thinking that there is no real point, I guess, or at least not that I understood, at which this will move down to the what is it, the elect.
To the actual prison, Kim?
The powerhouse.
Yeah.
I think we lost Kim's video and I'm not hearing her either.
Well, the plan has shifted. It looks like the powerhouse may be off the table at this point, so a new home would have to be secured.
So I guess then the question would be, are they just moving the present museum from the rec center to the opera house? Like all of the cells and brouhahas?
No, I know that they're, is Brent on here?
No, Brent couldn't join us today, but we've spoken with him and could shed some light on this if it's helpful.
Well, I know, I'll shed some light on it if you don't mind.
Sure.
The plan, we would disassemble what's in the rec center. But in terms of what is reused, I think that they would pretty much start from scratch with the exception of the historic cell door that is actually belongs to Albany and which we have on like as a borrow. So what actually most of what is in the exhibit in the rec center would go into storage or find some sort of reuse. But I think that, that was done in the 90s, early 90s. And I think at this point, we would, there's a very different approach now for the project. And I think the preview center would reflect that.
Yeah, I can confirm that the total project cost that Brent has provided, the $697,000, is focused on the fabrication of the exhibition itself. And so there will be meaningful work to design and produce a new exhibition for the preview center.
Okay, thanks. And I'm sorry, of course, my signal gave out right in the middle of your answers, but I will follow up offline. The second question that I actually had to do with the I guess I shouldn't be calling it a parking garage. My understanding was that under DRI guidelines, we were not able to fund a parking garage, but we are apparently able to fund a multimodal transportation center. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct, yes.
Semantics are a wonderful thing. And my final comment is just, I would echo those comments made previously by some other people that I'm trying to get a better understanding, I guess, as I look at this list of projects about, the potential for revenue generation from some of them. And I'm not sure I'm entirely clear, but, there are clearly things that have community benefit here, whether it's the Sing Sing Kill or whether it's public art or whatever, that are really just for the enhancement and the betterment of our community. And no one's going to pay a fee to see the public art, but we are all going to enjoy it. And that's a little different than things like the pier, which, at least in my mind, seems to suggest some opportunity for revenue generation. The same thing with the Sing Sing Museum, the same thing with the Opera House. And I guess I'm, as I'm weighing these things, it is the parking garage. It's making a difference to me in some respects about what things absolutely cannot happen without public support versus those things that do on the back end. And admittedly, the front end investment may be significant, but on the back end have some ability to generate revenue to whether it's retire a bond or other type of debt service. And I just am trying to get a better handle on that. So any light you can shed on that, Catherine, would also be really helpful.
Yeah, and I do think that, what you're sort of touching on, which is, which projects cannot happen without the support of DRI, I think is a helpful way to think about it, and what, we've heard in other communities as well. There may be projects that, can generate some revenue, but, perhaps would not get built without DRI support. But in other cases, there may be a revenue generation opportunity, but perhaps other grants or financing available to them. So I do think that's a helpful framing when looking at the list. Okay, I see hands from Dana White and from Erica. There are a couple of people who haven't. Oh, well, I don't know, Dana, you spoke about the Sing Sing prison, but I know that you've asked any questions, so you should go ahead. And then I may ask folks who haven't chimed in yet if they'd like to share any questions or thoughts.
All right. So I don't have questions so much as arguments, because I believe that there are a core group of projects here that work synergistically together. And that can't happen well without certain other things happening. So the multimodal transportation center is actually key to 200 Main. It is key to the post office development lot, if that ever happens. It is key to the Opera House, providing parking for events there. So that to me is a project that unlocks a lot of things. And to me, they go together. The community center is also crucial. And then I'm looking at things that where we can solve problems that we have faced for decades and been unable to wrestle to the ground. And that would be 200 Main. That would be the Sing Sing Prison Museum, which has been discussed for 25 years, I think, and which I believe now has found exactly what it ought to be. And that is a unique museum isn't maybe even the word, but a unique forum to examine social and criminal justice, both as it played out here in Sing Sing and as it plays out elsewhere, and how we can rethink and come up with different ways of the incarceral issues. I think that's super important. I think a new space, and I think the Village Pier and extension is a super cool thing as well. But I do agree that we need to kind of figure out who would use it, how would it be used, does it generate revenue? I'm personally not in the mood to spend money so somebody can tie up their jet ski and go get a cocktail. I'm just, not really my priority, but I do see how it could be an amazing educational and also tourist
maybe it can
benefit.
I mean,
oh, I'm sorry, what? Somebody, okay, so that's just me. And then also the town, the new concert venue would be great. So I mean, those are and the Opera House is pretty much still kind of my favorite. Just because, as the former historian, I just know what that building has been through, and I know how much we've wanted to bring it back into the community as a functioning space. And I just think that this really is the opportunity to do that. And the stars have aligned in a way that we can strategize with these properties and figure them out together instead of piecemeal over a period of years or whatever. So this is an extraordinary opportunity. So I just wanted to say that.
But the people who own it are such idiots. Station Plaza.
I think you need to mute yourself.
Sorry. My apologies.
Erica, I think you had a hand raised. I'll give you the floor, and then I'll ask folks who haven't yet chimed in to share any questions or thoughts that they may have.
I just have a quick nuts and bolts point. We talked about how, if we decide to fund more than the 9.75 million, we could spread the money a little thinner. What if, for example, some of these projects cannot leverage the money elsewhere to meet their financial goal? What happens with that funding? What are the metrics? I see that this process is very organized, and I really appreciate that. Will that money then be, I assume it's going to be followed, that the state is going to have some metrics to track and make sure. Will that money then be returned into the general pool for other projects that, have a better backbone to use?
So Erica, just to clarify, is your question like, should a project go in the strategic investment plan, then be selected by the state, and then potentially stall? Is there a mechanism to recapture that funding for the village? Is that right?
Well, my question, I guess it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So if we have $9.75 million and we select projects where folks are asking for 1.2, and then we're saying, okay, well, we're willing to give you, 20% less than what you've asked for. And then they have to leverage, for example, the Olive Opera House 1.6 million elsewhere, and then they can't come up with it. What happens, what's the process to track that they're actually gonna find that money, especially where we have a private entity rather than, I'm assuming the village, has a process and they're more, vetted with their leveraging. But with private entities, we may not necessarily have the same level of accountability. So what if, for example, for the sake of argument, we say to Olive Opera House, we're going to give you 1.2 million, and then now you have to come up with 1.8 on your own, or whatever. I'm not sure if my math is adding up, but you get my point. And then they say, we can't find that 1.8. So then does that 1.5 go back into the pot for the other projects?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think one that we would likely need to discuss with the state. My sense is that the state contracting entity, whether it's ESD or HCR, they would execute a contract with the project sponsor, right? And so that project sponsor is making a commitment that they could move the project forward. That's not to say that projects don't stall, they do. And so then I think it's a question of, what's the, accountability mechanism? How, if that project were to stall, how could that money potentially be reused? I don't have a great answer to that offhand. I think we would need to speak with the state.
Yeah. Catherine, I think that's exactly right. Like, it is a contract that, we would be signing with the project sponsor, with this is money coming from DRI. This is with the expectation that there is what they've committed to in this plan. And yeah, if that project does happen to fall through, like, that's why we want to have that $12 to $15 million range, so that there are other projects that have been evaluated in this process to go forward.
I just have to say that almost all grants, and Erica, this is, and I think this is no different. This is not a pot of money deposited in our bank. It's essentially a different kind of a grant. And as has happened with the grants, good intentions, everything worked out, all the ducks were lined up, something happens, a recession, a pandemic, I don't know, people die, whatever. The money doesn't get really redistributed. It doesn't happen. Sometimes people come to the village and say, look, could you help us out? And we sit around and figure out if we can come up, but not on these projects. These are too big for us. So my assumption is, like all grants, you're signing a contract. There are all these levers. There are all these milestones you have to meet. And when you don't, the state says to you, hey, this is a binding contract. So I think I feel good about leaving it to them to manage their grant the way they do all their grants. But I don't think money ever comes back to the invisible pot. I've never seen that pot. So, in any of the
No.
grants. So I think that's probably more likely. But I think that's why this is amazing. We're so close on round one of being where the state said, which is try to be somewhere around 15. We're so close if we did all of these, that now we're just saying, hey, let's just really hone this down into our priorities. But we're very close to the number they suggested we come in at, and they've been doing this a number of times. So
Yeah, that's right.
So
Yeah,
are there like, I'm sorry, I just want to follow up. So is there, so say, are there, like Plan B projects that we can have waiting on the back burner if that can be funded? If we
I
want
mean,
to come.
that is the purpose of the strategic investment plan, right? To Susan's point, like the plan identifies more projects than could be funded with a DRI in the event that a project, falls through or stalls. So that is the purpose of identifying greater than $9.7 million of funding.
So they would be funded. So other projects could potentially be funded that in the first round will say, sorry, Charlie. And then if another project falls through, we could say, well, actually, we do have this money for you. You're saying that's a thing that can happen.
Yeah, I think that's the hope. I think that, the program's in its 5th year. And so there may still be projects from early years that are going through this process, right? But that's the hope.
I just want to say I was on the phone with a few folks from Peekskill this morning. Nobody on this call can answer that and say, sure, that'll happen and then be quoted in 6 months or 6 years. They just can't. They can't speak for their colleagues or for another committee. But the reality of it is, and I spoke to the mayor in New Rochelle, with their, it turns out like the reality is that when projects come in over budget, then other grants might be available, that these projects do get listed on the state's, I don't know, they must have a magic like board somewhere, and they list all the different events and initiatives that say this is like the plan B, as you said, Erica. Next time a grant comes up, could be Arts Westchester grant that they might be involved in. It could be like transportation, it could be environment, it could just be because the governor's putting out an economic development thing. Like those things that are listed, not just from our cohort, but others, are the first ones maybe that are looked at. Because in fact, in both Peaks and New Rochelle, when money was needed for projects that were a little bit out, they did receive it through other grants and multiple other grants. So however it gets there, and I don't think anybody can guarantee it because then they'll be held for it. We'd say, but you told us so. And nobody on this gallery can say that. But it seems to be a reality, like I would bet on that before I bet on a lottery ticket. Let me put it that way, by far. I'm really comfortable after today's conversation that that's what actually happens. That is why we were very excited about DRI. It wasn't just 10 million, it's all the other pieces that come with it. That's what's going to be transformative for our village.
All right, so we are at 7:30. I know there are some folks who we haven't yet heard from. I think what we'd like to understand is, in order to get from 15.7 to a lower number, projects would need to come off the list. And I've heard that there are projects that a number of folks have felt are really important to the downtown. So we could potentially identify those projects. Or we could hear from folks if there, are projects that you think may be excellent projects. Again, all these projects are very strong projects, but may not meet the overall goals of the DRI as well as the others. So that's around, catalytic impact, transforming downtown Ossining and spurring economic development there.
So Catherine, just a quick question.
Yes.
You had us all fill out a survey, right? A kind of rank order. Did you all aggregate that? Do you have a sense of what the LPC is favoring? I mean, obviously some things have changed tonight, but I think it would be helpful to know that.
Yes, yeah, we do have that information available. I think because there have been project changes, we felt like it wasn't exactly an apples to apples comparison. But yeah, we could consider circulating that as a sort of baseline.
Yeah, I do think it would be helpful, even though there have been some slight changes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could say, I don't want to sort of speak out of turn here, but we could, perhaps, share the projects that are sort of in the top 5 and see if folks like still feel strongly about that. Maybe that's one way to do it. I mean, another approach is, do folks, when looking at this list, do folks have strong feelings about projects that, again, may not meet the goals quite as well as the others, and we could sort of go from like the bottom up, so to speak, as opposed to the top down in identifying projects that may come out. Hi, Marlene. Yes.
I guess if you wanted to go from the bottom up, I could definitely give you my bottom numbers, or the bottom projects, and, just not meaning that they're bad or good, but these are the ones that kind of hit the bottom of my bucket. Are you doing it? Do you want to just take them verbally, or are we going through another poll, later on in the week, or you just want us to kind of just let you know?
Yeah, I think our hope for tonight's meeting was to see if there sort of was consensus among the group through discussion. So if you feel comfortable sharing them, maybe we could, hear from others as to whether they're on the same page.
Okay, so I think just because there was some concern issue tonight, and I took that under advisement very closely. It wasn't in my bottom, but it kind of is probably at the bottom of my bottom, is the Olive Opera House, and then the Sing Sing Museum launch, the facade improvement, the art, permanent art structures, the Wi-Fi, and the signage.
I just, sorry, I don't think this is going to be entirely productive to, I mean, I don't know. I just think, there's a process where, we can rank order things as a committee and yeah, I don't know. It seems to be a little disorderly doing it this way, but.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with that. I think, first of all, I think those are a lot, with all due respect, Marlene, to take off. I mean, that's like losing about half of these. And I'm wondering, are these in the order that that we ranked them originally? So it's like the top one was the Joseph Caputo and the bottom one was the marketing and branding?
No, they're not in the
they're not in any order. Okay.
No.
Okay.
These are sort of ordered geographically.
Could we see that in the order that we voted them on them?
Yeah, I think we don't have it in the slide, but we do have that information available if folks are interested in.
I think that's very important, that we know what our initial take was, and then maybe have another take, and then really look at this objectively and see, which ones, I think if we lost one of these, and said, let's do a CFA on that instead, or maybe, just, or analyze it a bit more, that might be a way to go and just come in at a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And to be clear, the reason why I ranked the ones that I ranked the lowest in my mind is that there are absolutely other grants out there that could cover some of these projects. That was my thinking.
I should be covering those.
I'm sorry, what was that, Kim? Oh, maybe Kim stepped away. Yeah. Joyce, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Jeff. I think we've we've heard some really significant changes in some of the projects, and I would actually literally would like to sit with it a little bit. And in hearing from other people, I kind of reordered my list as well. And after hearing Mayor Levin say that there's some things like, for instance, Mayor, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said the public Wi-Fi may be able to get funding someplace else, and I really love that project. Is it that you can find the funding, and you know, if someone took something off that you said that you can find funding somewhere else, and then we can't find the funding, and it's something we really wanted to have, it kind of threw me off a little bit. I don't want to potentially take something off I felt to be important because there was a potential of finding funding, and then funding can't be found.
Yeah,
That's all I have right now.
I think, yeah, and that's why I sort of kicked off before saying, is it that you're asking us to sort of go through this list and give our own opinions? And then I realized with 30 people in the gallery, how does one do that, right? And how does one rank? Because every person that goes after the person before them may actually be influenced and say, hey, that's a really good point. Let me change my order. So I think the voting on this is where some of us are stumbling. I think Jeff's right. It's like, if this was organized in the way we originally voted, people could say, I'm shifting mine. Or if you resend that survey to us now, knowing a little bit more of what we do, we could very quickly rank, right? We could also should have a little thing that says, I rank to what the historian just said, which is, I really like this project, but I'm pretty convinced people seem to feel comfortable either because the amount is not a huge amount, right? Or because people on this call know that there are other funding availability. I don't know that, but they seem to think so. So I like it, but I want it as a secondary. Like there has to be a way to vote amongst 30 people. There's no way we can all have conversations about we like or don't like, or then our sort of question other people about why they're ranking. That's like a 4-hour offsite.
But that's what we should be doing, I think.
Susan, did you want to jump in?
Sure. So 2 points. I think that's definitely to the point of everyone says we can circulate that evaluation survey again and, you know, get some of that information now that you all have had time to discuss it and weigh the pros and cons of all of the projects. So that's definitely something that we can gather on our side and, you know, recirculate. I think the second point is, you know, we do have a community meeting next week and we really wanted to take a slate of projects to them to get feedback. And so we are at 15.7 million. Are we comfortable knowing it's 740 saying, hey, we want to take this to the community meeting and get their feedback on all of these projects?
Yeah, so I think what you're saying, Susan, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that we could recirculate the assessment to this group following this meeting, right? And with the updated information that we've shared today, we can make this PowerPoint available. Folks can take that assessment and then we can let folks know, you know, where the projects fall with regard to the cutoff, so to speak, for total dollar amount in the strategic investment plan. And for purposes of the community meeting, which is like right around the corner, because we're close at 15.7 million, it sounds like you would be comfortable if the LPC is in agreement with bringing all these projects to the community, and then there'll be some opportunity for community feedback on each of them.
Yes.
Karen, would you like to chime in? Karen, you're
on mute. Still on mute.
Sorry about that. So it's obviously an important exercise to make sure we have good community engagement. I think what the committees, some of the committee members are expressing is we have one more meeting. So it's I have to be honest, and we've had a lot of internal discussions about this. It's not really clear to me. It is very, very, very hard to get consensus via email. And there needs to be an opportunity to be able to have conversations about it. When is that going to happen? I think that's what some of the committee members are asking.
And Karen, I'm sorry, could you say you're looking for people to have conversation about the results of the assessment that folks have completed?
I think that, look, we've gone through the committee's gone through a ranking process. In order to get to the point where you're distilling this, it's not clear to me, and I think this is really important, of when that's going to happen between now and 2 weeks from now. Because I think it's going to be very challenging to do that via email and get everybody, that doesn't give you the opportunity for this is a dialogue. It's not an email, without that dialogue and without that opportunity, I'm very concerned that we're not really achieving the purpose that we've set out to do here as effectively, because we've been compromised with Zoom and COVID and everything else. I just want to make sure that we have that time to fully distill. We haven't even gotten the full report of the community feedback, which is going to also be needed. We only have anecdotal comments. So when does the committee get that information, and what's the process for distilling that and having the dialogue necessary to refine the projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think our hope for this evening's meeting was that we have the updated costs here, and to Marcia's point earlier, we're close. I think we wanted to understand from folks on the call in discussion if there were projects that people felt very strongly about and we were all in agreement, or if there were projects that folks felt may not meet the goals as well as the others and could potentially come out of contention. And it sounds like, for some folks, I think they have a sense of what that may be. And for others, it sounds like having, an assessment may be more helpful.
So as our consultant and our guide, what do you recommend that we do?
I think my sense would be that for the purpose of next week's meeting, we've gotten the okay from the Department of State to take this list of projects to the community and to have them weigh in on this list of projects. And between now and our next meeting, we can recirculate the assessment, and with this new information, folks can complete that. And then we'll need to share those results prior to our meeting in 2 weeks' time. And on June 21st, come together around a slate of projects that would go to the state for review.
So can we do something like, I don't know, is there a way to do this scientifically? To say, is there one or two that people feel strongly should come off and have a vote on that? And then maybe it just makes it easier. Or Mayor, not to put my esteemed co-chair on the spot here, but are there any that you feel that you would rather not go to the community?
I mean, remove things before it goes next week.
Is that appropriate? Yeah.
I mean, I know that, Mayor Levin, you had sort of kicked off by saying that there were some projects that you could
actually delineated my thinking that others would do the same, but truthfully, people still lack information to make that decision. So for me, I'm missing a lot of information on the pier extension. So it's hard for me to say where it is. It's definitely not in my top 6 or 7. I can cluster is what I can do. Like Marlene did, she clustered her bottom. I clustered my top. The pier doesn't make it to the top. So I can do a clustering around the top 6 or 7, mostly around the pier. I simply don't know what the real costs are. I don't look at simply revenue as the only XY factor here. So the truth is, if we took a couple of projects off, we'd hit the mark. We could keep discussing all of this, but we only need to remove a couple of projects, 2 or 3 projects, keeping in mind that it can't affect others, which is what Trustee White was making her point. Her decisioning is around one thing, like the parking affects 6 other projects. Right, it enables. So to her, that project's important, maybe not even on its own, yeah, she's interested in revenue, and that's cool, but that's not her only reason. Her reason is that that enables 6 other projects, which is important to her. So it seems like clustering is something people actually do as, I guess, human beings. So for me, the pier is a very expensive project that is not clear to me exactly who it benefits, and is not clear to me that the numbers are the numbers are the numbers. Whereas some of the other things, the numbers I think are more real that I can count on. So I lack information on one item, and that item I might say, we'll put a limit on it and find out who the real sponsor is and more information. The rest of them, I think I said it actually in the beginning, which is I think the art can come from a different place. We can get money for that. The branding and strategy, we can probably get money somewhere else from that, and the Wi-Fi we can get, and I don't know if that brings us down enough. The performance space is actually is not the village sponsor, so I'm not sure I should be commenting on it. Yeah, I think that's how I reached and lowered the number to something more. Oh, and the facade, established the grant for the commercial facade, because I'm not clear exactly how that would play out.
So can
I sort of clustered what I think could be funded elsewhere or complementary, as somebody, I think it was Catherine said, there's also this complementary bucket.
That's right.
That could be put into and explain to the community that we're taking these and putting them in this other bucket, which is part of this whole process.
So does anybody feel that that's something that can be done? I mean, do people have problems?
No, I agree. I think the pier's got to go because I think that's, significant and reduces the total number down significantly. I don't have strong feelings about any of the smaller projects because they're not really all that material. But I do think if we got rid of the pier, that would move us significantly toward where we want to be.
Yeah, I would
really get us to the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that might be a good strategy because I think there can be, I've seen the pier, for example, in Peekskill get CFA money if there's a decision made to move forward with that. And the little projects, Mayor, sometimes it's good to have a couple little ones in there because then it makes, it's really no skin off of our back and it makes people feel like theirs is included as well. I'll just offer that. But I think the pier, I've seen Peekskill get CFA money for the pier, if that's decided that that's the way to go. And that would kind of do it.
Yeah. I'm seeing some head nodding.
Yeah, but I'm gonna be respectful. I sit in hundreds of meetings, as some other people on this call do as well, but not everybody does. I don't want the tiredness of being on a meeting call for 2 hours to all of a sudden sort of push everything at the end to something that I don't want to drive the conversation. It makes me really uncomfortable that people walk away and say, whoa, what was that? I don't want that to happen. I want people to really think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of listen to at least some of the commentary, and maybe I think Joyce said correctly, sit with it a little bit. Some of us came in knowing exactly what we wanted because we maybe got to some different kind of meetings, or we just know some of these. Others don't. They just don't. And I would be more comfortable if we sat a little bit and then came back and said, yeah, I get it. Okay. Or maybe
but Rika, why wouldn't we just check the pier with that survey? Why wouldn't we just check the pier with the survey that we all submitted? Right. And so I perhaps if that corroborates with the survey, then why wouldn't we just eliminate it?
Yeah. Where did it come out on the survey? Can I ask where that one came out on the original list of priorities?
Yeah, my sense is that it was in the middle. It was not in the top 5 and not in the bottom 5.
We have a hand raised in the gallery. The person,
is that Jeff?
No, Gareth.
We do have 2 LPC members who have their hands raised, and so I do want to make space before we speak with members of the public to have Marlene and Jeff chime in.
So I think, and this is just, if it makes it easier for everyone, is there a way, Catherine, to send out that poll again, ask everyone to give back their information along, so like between today and Thursday, by Friday, we can see what the ranking was from the prior poll, give out that information and rank again by Friday, so that by the next meeting, we can at least have a small discussion. If we have to have a meeting in between to talk about where we are and just say, these are the top 10, these are the top 5, this is where we landed.
Yep. I think that would be possible. Yeah. Jeff, would you like to chime in? And we
Yeah,
can-
Before it goes, can I just, again, I'm not interrupting, I want to make a point clarification. For those of us that are busy, etc., if they don't hand in that survey, assume it's their original survey. Don't assume they're not answering, but actually take their first survey as the survey. Because for some people, this is where they're going, so I don't want them discounted either, if that's okay. We'll do a due date, due time, and whoever hands in, great, and those that don't, it's their first survey that I think should be counted, and I think that would be a fair way to look at it. Sorry.
That's all right, Jeff, go ahead.
Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, just to reiterate what's already being saying, I think just if we can have the survey, I think we can quickly turn it around. If people don't submit it, then that's their just go with what they said before. But I think it would be helpful just to kind of, rather than rush through in the final minutes of this meeting and say we're going to pull things off the list. It seems seems like a better process.
Okay. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Certainly. Peter, would you like to chime in, and then we can talk about our next steps?
Yeah, rather than doing the survey the way we did it before, can we make this a little bit more stark? We're talking about eliminating projects. Can we say, okay, each one of us, everyone who's on this, come back with $12 to $13 million of projects, and the rest, draw a line through them. Not 1 through 5. This one gets a 3 and a 2. I don't know where that winds up. Just each one of us, which projects are you killing in your mind? Seriously.
Maybe we'll use a somewhat different.
Seriously, not like this is like kind of like this, but like there's we've got to make some decisions and very soon.
Yeah. That's right.
I mean, I can tell you like right off, branding and marketing. What are we branding and marketing? We haven't done the things that we're going to try to brand and market for. So right now we're branding and marketing a parking lot in the middle of our town, our village, excuse me. So, I don't know where we are with that. Like in a few years when we've hopefully done a bunch of stuff and we've got a buzzing village center, we can do some branding and marketing. I don't think there's any place for it today.
Okay.
Is there a usefulness in having a top 5 and a bottom 5? Having folks identify top 5 and bottom 5?
We can speak internally about the survey metric. What I'm hearing from folks is that there was a proposal to potentially remove the Pier Extension project. I think folks are feeling like it's useful for the group to do the assessment once more, and we'll try and streamline it, right? So you're not sort of ranking on a scale of 1 to 4 for many different categories across 15 projects. And then we'll be able to share that information out and then make a decision about which projects may be removed from this list. Karen, did you want to chime in?
Has everybody else on the committee spoken? I just want to make sure. So I just want to really make things clear, because I think this is really challenging work, and thank you all for participating in this process, which has gone at warp speed and required a lot of your time and input and thoughtfulness. We have about $15 million plus worth of projects. We're only going to get funded $9.7 million. So when we're talking about not going through with this for the DRI, please know that these projects are part of a strategic framework of things that if they don't get funded now, they will likely get funded in other through other avenues and will remain as part of an overall strategy. We can't possibly do everything we set out to do with $10 million. There's some limitations. This is very focused on economic development and revitalization. So keeping that in place, like I just don't want to feel like this is the be all and end all. This is really the starting point. And after this, because we have this framework, we've that's where we'll really be able to leverage. That's where we'll really be able to make sure we can go forward, because we will have those synergies in place and we will be able to have something to market in the future. That's pretty spectacular. So just want to really put that in context, because again, this is a starting point, and everybody in the committee should just know that we have goals and objectives and a limited amount of dollars.
Yep. Yep. I think that's a great concluding thought. All right, let's move ahead. So for our next steps, between now and community meeting 3, we will circulate another assessment to the LPC per our conversation tonight, so that folks can prioritize projects, and, based on their alignment with the DRI goals. Then at community meeting 3, we will share the project list and ask for feedback. Members of the public will have 5 tickets. They'll be able to pick the top 5 projects that, in their opinion, best align with the goals, and we'll share that information with you. And then we'll have our final LPC meeting in 2 weeks on Tuesday, June 21st. We had planned for that meeting to be hybrid. If folks can attend in person, I think that may be helpful. So we'll follow up again and get a sense of folks' availability to do that. And of course, the final plan will be submitted to DOS in July. All right, let's do public comment. Jamie, are you available to?
Sure. Is there a time frame that you wanted each person to speak?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've got it on the screen. So we're going to ask folks to please limit their question or comment to 2 minutes. Again, another reminder that this meeting is being recorded. And if you're using Zoom, you can click the raise hand feature. If you're using a phone, you can press *9.
Okay, great. So the first person I'm going to bring over is Gareth Huffam. I am going to promote you to a panelist. If you can turn on your camera and unmute, that would be great. Thank you. Can you stop screen sharing, because I'm having trouble seeing people?
Yes, Christy, can you stop the screen share, please?
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, I can't see if Carol is here.
Hi, Gareth, I see you.
They are.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I realize I only have 2 minutes, so I'll get right to it. I wanted to clarify a couple of the points that have been brought up. First, I wanted to say that the comment by Marcia Gordon that ancillary costs going forward is really something that has to be addressed with all of these projects. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a very critical point. And to that point, the maintenance costs of the pier has been brought up as one of the main sticking points for it, and I think a lot of the committee members' minds, and I think rightfully so. However, the clarification is this: the project as put forward shows 4 components to the pier extension. Let me list them. One is a fixed pier. The other is the next is a 60-foot floating dock at the end that we call the Clearwater dock, and that would be winterized, so that would remain in place year round, would not involve having to pull it out and store. And then there are 2 blocks of smaller docks that were originally conceived to be transient docking, so that people could come in, a dock, go, have dinner at the restaurant, or attend the show, one of the evening shows, something like that. Since the time that this was put forward, there was so much concern about the cost of maintaining those 2 components of floating docks, the transient docks, that I, who have been advocating for this for a long time, I've made it clear that I have no interest anymore in those two transient dock components because
Yeah, Gareth, you're at 2 minutes. Please complete your thought.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So those two transient docks, which are the main concern for everybody from the maintenance point of view, and for the OBCC has brought up the issue of those transient docks, getting in the way of kayakers and so forth. All of that would go away. In addition, the cost would probably come down. So I wanted to make that point. I wish I had more time, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Gareth. Yeah, just so we understand what you're sharing is that the transient docks would be removed from the project scope and it would just be the fixed pier extension with the larger dock to accommodate ships. Okay.
If that's what the village wanted, that is certainly what I would want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, sorry, I was talking. The next person is Mark Fry. Mr. Fry, I'm going to bring you over, and if you can turn on your camera and unmute. Okay, Mr. Fry. Mr. Fry, Mark Fry?
Excuse me. I think we're good now. First of all, it's been an excellent meeting. I agree with many of the speakers on many points. From a procedural point of view, I'm glad you decided to give us all more time. I'd like to make oops, excuse me. Let me start my timer here. I would love to have the results of that survey. I think that's really helpful to find out what the votes were so far on the previous survey. Secondly, I'd love to get the results of the next survey that you're going to send out, so that in this process, theoretically, there's a way for everyone to vote in their own preference, projects 1 through 15, and tabulate it, and then we'll know exactly how the 15 LPC members would like to proceed. So I think that that's a good way to do that. I had a specific question that I'll pose it now, but I don't expect an answer. The streetscaping at Station Plaza is listed for $350,000 of DRI funding for a total project cost of $500,000. It's listed on your list tonight for $857,000. So I'd like to find out what's involved there. And secondly, the folks in that area I've been working with very, very closely over the last 6 months. They've seen people walking around with clipboards, but both the single property owner on Quimby Street, Westerly Marina, and the Paradise Oil people have no idea what's proposed. And the people on Water Street, Central Water Street, don't know what's proposed. So I think we need a lot more information, first about the total cost of that streetscaping project, and what exactly, what are the conceptual designs. And secondly, it would be good to get the input from the folks who live in that neighborhood. I'll leave it at that. Excellent meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. I will bring you over. I can find you. Yeah. In the meantime, I'm going to bring over Claudia Mausner. Claudia, if you can turn your camera on and unmute. Hi, Claudia.
Looks like it worked. Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to meet all of you guys virtually, and some I've met in person. So 2 points I wanted to make. One, about the housing. As somebody who tried for 3 different times as a renter to move to Ossining and found it impossible until I had a family situation that let me purchase a co-op. It is disheartening or worse to see that column empty, and it perhaps is too late, but even 1 or 2 units, my expectation is that much housing in this area is going to be lost as the place develops. And if not, and rents are going to go up. And Westchester, Ossining, this is a crisis. There's no other way to put it. It's a crisis. And so if there's any way to include that in any of these projects, it seems to me leaving that out is a mistake, even philosophically. The second thing, in terms of community engagement, community involvement, I've been interested in this, but only found out that this was actually happening and on its way like a month ago from a posting on Nextdoor. So I would strongly encourage use of the library. I've been in there multiple times, but posting paper as opposed to only online. One of the downsides of online is people have to be looking for things. If they're not already looking, then oftentimes it's just not apparent. So getting the word out for next week, obviously, whatever COVID protocol. I'm assuming that you've included email input. I didn't hear that mentioned. I may have missed it, but that was how I gave a lot of input of my ideas about the project. And then lastly, asking the community for their top 5 choices after you've gone through this process yourselves, and you all know a lot, I think is not going to be very meaningful. So I'm hoping that those in charge can find some way perhaps to have people rank the criteria that are most important, thanks, or prioritize in some way that gives some qualitative data that could be useful to the committee. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Claudia.
So it does not look like there
Can
is.
I'd like.
I'm sorry, Rika.
So communication is always a challenge. I could go through the list of upwards of 20 different ways that we've been communicating this for upwards of 6 months. Not the least of which is a weekly mayor's message that goes out to, I don't know, 7,500 people in this community.
8,000.
I'm sorry? 8,000 people in the community. And what's really important to remember is that the people who are on this committee are not elected officials who are making, they are stakeholders and members of this community, longstanding members who live in this community, sit on a number of different organizations, talk to lots of people. That is why they were asked if they would participate in this. They themselves are community members. So when we talk about community members, I just want to be clear that this is not a legislative body making this, nor is it the state. There was a lot of work to make sure that we got people who are really representative of businesses, of residences. I do want to answer the housing because I saw it myself and it sort of made me shake my head a little bit like, wait, what's happening? So this is, the DRI has a purpose. Housing is an issue throughout Westchester County. It's not just in Ossining. And we don't live in an island. So what happens in a community next to us affects us and vice versa. But we are building in the downtown 109 unit mixed income affordable housing, amongst other things. And so housing is happening simultaneous to this and on parallel paths. So it isn't that housing has not been looked at. On the contrary, it was looked at first, even before this DRI project. And some of these projects, which is why Trustee White was talking about it, actually sit right next to some of the work that we're doing on housing that will actually affect things. Now, whether you think that creates higher rents or lower rents, I can't speak to that. As far as communications, I always say the same thing. People always say that they don't know and there's not enough and complain that there's way too much of it. It's very, very challenging to find the exact number that's right, the exact amount. I will say that the Village Fair this Saturday, that usually attracts thousands of our members of our community, will have a tent with folks there to ask members of the community who may otherwise have not been as involved, will explain some of these programs. And we have had community and public meetings in all sorts of forms and fashion, both in English and Spanish. But there's an opportunity to all your friends, anyone on here, Saturday, you know, come in person. I think Maddie Sahaj is going to be there. I think Jamie's going to be there. I know I'm going to be there. I know that other folks are going to be there who are on this call. So there's another opportunity to engage with the community. And we will continue to try to find more and more ways. It's just hard to go back 5 months worth of conversations with every new person that hears about it, but we'll do our best to go through it in an organized fashion as much as we can. I'm always happy to discuss the projects if people contact me personally, not an issue for me.
Thank you. All right, Jamie, are there any other folks who have raised their hand and would like to speak during public comment?
Not at this time. I don't know if you wanted to do a last call
Yeah,
for
let's do a last call
comments.
now.
Yeah. Are we taking more than Mr. Fry has his hand up? Does he get a second opportunity to speak?
I think given that we're over time, we should likely keep moving.
Okay.
But Mark, please feel free to reach out. You know where to find me. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We will follow up with an assessment and keep you posted by email.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.